Montana Territory, 1879. The setting sun painted the distant mountains in hues of amber and gold as Xavier Thompson guided his horse along the rugged trail leading to Whispering Pines. His lean, muscular frame swayed with the motion of the chestnut stallion beneath him, a rhythm as natural to him as breathing after years in the saddle. At 24, Xavier had already lived several lifetimes of adventure, but the weight of his latest mission pressed upon his broad shoulders like the sky itself. Not much farther. Thunder, he murmured, running a hand through his sun-bleached brown hair. The cool evening breeze caressed his lightly stubbled jaw as he adjusted the worn leather saddlebags containing everything he owned in this world, plus one precious document that would change everything. The town emerged from the landscape like a mirage, a collection of wooden buildings straddling the newly laid railroad tracks. Xavier had heard tales of Whispering Pines, how it had grown from nothing into a thriving community in just 5 years. But tales didn't mention the scent of pine sap in the air or the way the distant church bells toll seemed to carry a promise. As he approached the bustling main street, Xavier couldn't help but wonder if he'd made the right decision. The deed in his saddlebag felt impossibly heavy. 800 acres of Montana wilderness, purchased with every dollar he'd saved from 7 years of cattle drives and bounty hunting. Land that would soon become either his greatest achievement or his most devastating failure. "Newcomer," called a friendly voice from the boardwalk. "You look like a man who could use a meal and a drink." Xavier touched his hat brim and smiled at the heavy-set saloon owner waving him toward a hitching post. "Obliged for the welcome. This Whispering Pines." "The very same. Amos Delaney at your service. First drinks on the house for travelers." Xavier dismounted with the fluid grace of a lifetime horseman, his tall frame unfolding to reveal the full breadth of his shoulders beneath his trail-dusty blue shirt. "Xavier Thompson, I'll take you up on that meal, Mr. Delaney, but I've got business to attend to first. Where might I find your land office?" Amos's bushy eyebrows rose slightly. "End of the street, next to the telegraph. Though Mr. Sanders closed up about an hour ago. I'll catch him tomorrow, then." Xavier smiled, revealing a dimple in his right cheek that softened his otherwise weathered appearance. "That meal's still available. Come on in. The frontier's finest stew awaits." Xavier led Thunder to the water trough before securing him at the hitching rail. His keen hazel eyes scanned the street, assessing the town that might become his home. Women in calico dresses and men in work clothes moved about with purpose. The buildings, while not grand, appeared well-maintained, with fresh paint on several storefronts. A promising sign. The saloon interior was surprisingly clean, with polished glasses behind the bar and a small stage where a piano player coaxed a gentle melody from an upright. Xavier chose a corner table with his back to the wall, an old habit from dangerous years on the trail. "What brings you to our little corner of the territory?" Amos asked, delivering a bowl of savory beef stew. Xavier considered his answer carefully. His dream was fragile, barely more than a whisper in his own heart. Sharing it too soon might crush it entirely. "I've purchased land nearby," he said simply. "Looking to settle down. Ranching, something like that." Before Amos could inquire further, the saloon doors swung open, and Xavier's breath caught in his throat. A young woman stood framed in the doorway, the golden sunset illuminating her like a vision. Her honey-blonde hair was swept into a practical but becoming arrangement, a few tendrils framing a face of extraordinary beauty. Unlike the gaudy saloon girls Xavier had encountered throughout the West, she wore a modest blue dress with white trim that complemented her slender figure perfectly. "Miss Katherine," Amos called cheerfully, "your father's order is ready." Xavier watched, transfixed, as she approached the bar with graceful steps. There was something in her carriage, a quiet dignity mixed with unmistakable determination, that fascinated him instantly. "Thank you, Mr. Delaney," she replied, her voice melodious and clear. "Father's working late at the clinic again. 3 new cases of influenza arrived on yesterday's train." "The good doctor works too hard," Amos replied, handing her a wrapped package. "You tell him I said so." "I always do." Her smile transformed her face from merely beautiful to radiant. As she turned to leave, her eyes met Xavier's. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity, he felt as though she could see straight through to his soul, to the dream he carried, to the pain that had forged it. She nodded politely, and continued toward the door. Just as she reached it, a group of rowdy cowboys burst in, nearly knocking her backward. Xavier was on his feet instantly, crossing the room in 3 long strides to steady her with a gentle hand at her elbow. "Careful there, miss," he said softly. Up close, her eyes were the clearest blue he'd ever seen, like mountain lakes reflecting a summer sky. "Thank you," she replied, studying his face with curious intensity. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Katherine Abernathy." "Xavier Thompson. Just arrived today. Welcome to Whispering Pines, Mr. Thompson." She glanced at his hand, still lightly holding her elbow. He released her immediately, feeling heat rise in his face. "My apologies, Miss Abernathy." The faintest smile touched her lips. "No need for apologies when preventing falls, Mr. Thompson." She nodded toward the wrapped package. "I should deliver this while it's hot. Perhaps we'll meet again." "I'd like that," he replied honestly. As she departed, Xavier returned to his table, feeling the curious stares of several patrons. Clearly, Katherine Abernathy was someone of significance in Whispering Pines. Doc Abernathy's daughter, Amos explained, refilling Xavier's coffee without being asked. "Smartest young lady in 3 counties. Teaches at the schoolhouse and helps her father at the clinic." Xavier nodded, filing away this information as he returned to his meal. But his thoughts remained with Katherine's clear blue eyes and the inexplicable feeling that in them, he'd glimpsed a kindred spirit. Little did he know that their brief encounter had stirred similar thoughts in Katherine as she hurried down the darkening street toward her father's clinic, wondering about the handsome stranger with sorrow hidden behind his smile and purpose written in every line of his body. The land office was precisely where Amos had indicated, a narrow building wedged between the telegraph office and a dressmaker's shop. Xavier arrived early the following morning, dressed in his cleanest shirt and freshly brushed hat, the precious deed secure in his leather portfolio. "Come in," called a voice when he knocked. Harold Sanders was a thin man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose and ink-stained fingers. He looked up from a stack of documents as Xavier entered. "Good morning. How may I assist you?" "Xavier Thompson, sir. I purchased land through your office by correspondence. The old Miller property northwest of town." Recognition dawned on Sanders' face. "Yes, of course. 800 acres along Miller Creek. Finalized last month." He shuffled through a drawer. "I have the updated surveys right here, Mr. Thompson." For the next hour, Xavier and Sanders pored over maps, discussing water rights, property boundaries, and access routes. With each detail confirmed, Xavier's excitement grew. The land was everything he'd hoped for: rich grassland, healthy timber, and most importantly, positioned perfectly for his purpose. "If you don't mind my asking," Sanders said as they concluded their business, "what do you plan to do with the property? It's fine grazing land, but awfully large for a starting ranch with no herd to speak of." Xavier hesitated, then decided that his plans would become public knowledge soon enough. "I'm building a home for orphaned children." Sanders' eyebrows shot up. "A what?" "A working ranch that will house, feed, and educate children who have nowhere else to go," Xavier explained, passion warming his voice. "Children who need skills and care to build a future." The land agent stared at him for a long moment. "That's quite ambitious." "It's necessary," Xavier replied simply. Before Sanders could respond, the office door opened, and Katherine Abernathy entered, carrying a stack of papers. She stopped short upon seeing Xavier. "Mr. Thompson, we meet again." Xavier stood quickly, removing his hat. "Miss Abernathy." Sanders cleared his throat. "Katherine brings the school records for the county register each month. Katherine, Mr. Thompson has just purchased the old Miller property. 800 acres. Her eyes widened slightly. "That's a significant undertaking." "Mr. Thompson has significant plans," Sanders replied with a skeptical tone that made Xavier's jaw tighten. "He intends to establish an orphanage there." Katherine's expression shifted from surprise to intense interest. "Is that so?" Xavier met her gaze steadily. "A home and working ranch for children who've lost their families. I was hoping to speak with town leaders about support for the project." "The town council meets tomorrow evening at the schoolhouse," Katherine said. "As the teacher, I could arrange for you to address them." The offer surprised him. "That would be most helpful, Miss Abernathy." 7 o'clock, she replied. "I'd be interested to hear more about your plans before then, if you're amenable. Perhaps over tea this afternoon? My father would be intrigued as well." Xavier felt a flicker of hope. An ally, especially one connected to both education and medicine, could make all the difference. I would be honored, he said sincerely. As they set a time and place, Xavier couldn't help but wonder at the coincidence that had brought Katherine into his path twice in less than a day. Was it mere chance, or was Whispering Pines already weaving its threads of destiny around his dream? The Abernathy home stood 2 streets back from the main thoroughfare, a handsome 2-story structure with a wide front porch and carefully tended flower beds. Xavier arrived precisely at 4 o'clock, hat in hand and heart pounding inexplicably in his chest. Katherine answered his knock, dressed in a simple but elegant green dress that complemented her fair complexion and brought out golden highlights in her honey blonde hair. "Mr. Thompson, welcome," she said, gesturing him inside. "Father is just finishing with a patient, but he'll join us shortly." The parlor was comfortably furnished with well-worn but quality pieces, bookshelves lining one wall, and a piano occupying the corner. Family photographs and botanical illustrations shared space with medical texts, a home of both science and sentiment. "You have a lovely home," Xavier observed as Katherine poured tea into delicate cups. "Thank you. We've been here since I was 12. She handed him a cup. "Before that, we traveled with the army. Father was a surgeon during the war." Xavier nodded, understanding coloring his expression. "Difficult years. For everyone," she agreed. "Which brings me to my curiosity about your project, Mr. Thompson. An orphanage is not typically a cowboy's retirement plan." Her directness caught him off guard, but he appreciated it. "No, I suppose it isn't. What inspired such an undertaking?" Xavier stared into his teacup, deciding how much to reveal. "I was orphaned young," he said finally, "raised by an uncle who saw me as free labor and little else. At 16, I left to find my own way." He looked up, meeting her attentive gaze. "I was lucky, strong enough to work cattle drives, smart enough to avoid the worst trouble. Many aren't so fortunate." Katherine's expression softened. "So you wish to provide what you didn't have. A home, skills, purpose." Xavier set down his cup. The war left thousands of children without parents. Mining accidents, disease, frontier hardships claim more every day. Institutions in the East are overflowing, and many children simply fall through the cracks, ending up on streets or in situations no child should endure. "You speak from experience," she observed quietly. Xavier nodded, unwilling to elaborate on the darker memories. "I've been saving for this since I was 19. Every cattle drive, every odd job, every bounty, all for this purpose." Before Katherine could respond, the door opened to admit an older gentleman with silver-streaked brown hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. "Katherine, Oh, we have company. Father, this is Mr. Xavier Thompson." "Mr. Thompson, my father, Dr. James Abernathy." Xavier stood, extending his hand. "A pleasure, sir." "The new owner of the Miller property, I understand," Dr. Abernathy said, shaking Xavier's hand firmly. "Katherine mentioned your plans. Most intriguing." For the next hour, Xavier outlined his vision, a working ranch where boys and girls would learn practical skills while receiving education and care. Buildings designed for comfort rather than institutional efficiency. A community rather than a facility. "The land has the old Miller farmhouse and barn," Xavier explained. "Serviceable for now, but ultimately, I plan to build proper dormitories, a schoolhouse, workshops." "Ambitious," Dr. Abernathy commented. "And expensive. I have savings for initial construction and operating costs for 1 year," Xavier acknowledged. "After that, the ranch must become largely self-sustaining through cattle, crops, and crafts the children produce." "And staffing?" Katherine asked. "You can't possibly manage everything alone." "I've corresponded with a married couple, former teachers from Chicago, interested in relocating, and I hope to find local support." Xavier hesitated. "I don't expect charity, but fair compensation for services and goods." Dr. Abernathy stroked his beard thoughtfully. "The town council will have questions about funding, oversight, and whether these children might become a burden on local resources." "Valid concerns," Xavier agreed. "I'm prepared to address them." As the conversation continued, Xavier couldn't help noticing how Katherine's eyes lit up when discussing educational aspects, or how her practical suggestions revealed both intelligence and compassion. By the time he departed, he felt cautiously optimistic. not just about the council meeting, but about the possibility of Catherine's continued involvement in his project. What he couldn't know was that Katherine stood watching from the window long after he disappeared down the street, her mind racing with possibilities that extended beyond mere professional interest in his orphanage. Something about Xavier Thompson's quiet determination and hidden depths called to her in ways no man ever had before. The schoolhouse was unexpectedly crowded when Xavier arrived for the town council meeting the following evening. Word of his plans had apparently spread through Whispering Pines like wildfire, drawing curious citizens alongside the 5 council members seated at a table at the front of the room. Katherine met him at the door, looking composed in a high-necked navy dress with her hair neatly pinned. "Quite a turnout," she murmured. "Don't be intimidated. Most are simply curious." "I appreciate the warning," Xavier replied, adjusting his string tie nervously. Mayor Frederick Wilkins, a portly man with impressive whiskers, called the meeting to order. After dispatching several town matters, he turned to Xavier. "I understand you wish to address the council regarding your intentions for the Miller property, Mr. Thompson." Xavier moved to the front of the room, acutely aware of all eyes upon him. Drawing a deep breath, he began articulating his vision, explaining both the humanitarian purpose and practical considerations of his planned orphanage ranch. "I don't come seeking handouts," he emphasized. "Rather, I hope to build a mutually beneficial relationship with Whispering Pines. The children will need education, medical care, supplies, all of which I intend to pay for fairly. In return, the ranch will eventually produce goods, provide services, and perhaps one day, some of these children will become contributing citizens of your community." Questions came rapidly after his presentation. Some practical, regarding water usage and property taxes. Others more pointed, about the type of children he intended to accept and whether they might bring unsavory elements to Whispering Pines. "I won't discriminate based on background," Xavier stated firmly. "Every child deserves opportunity, regardless of circumstances of birth or misfortune." "And if the venture fails?" asked Councilman Porter, a banker with cold eyes. "What becomes of these children then?" "The town cannot assume responsibility. I've established contingency arrangements with established orphanages in Denver," Xavier responded. "But I don't intend to fail, Mr. Porter." "Admirable sentiment," Porter replied skeptically. "But sentiment doesn't feed hungry mouths." Katherine rose suddenly from her seat. "If I may address the council?" Mayor Wilkins nodded. "Of course, Miss Abernathy. As the town's teacher, I've corresponded with colleagues throughout the territory. Several communities with similar arrangements report positive outcomes. Children receive care and education, while towns gain productive future citizens." Her clear voice carried authority despite her youth. "I've reviewed Mr. Thompson's plans in detail and find them both compassionate and practical." Xavier stared at her in surprise. She had said nothing about investigating his proposal. "Furthermore," Katherine continued, "I'm willing to personally oversee the educational aspects of the program, ensuring these children receive proper schooling while alleviating concerns about their integration." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Katherine Abernathy's endorsement carried significant weight in Whispering Pines. Dr. Abernathy stood next. "I'll provide medical oversight for the children. Regular examinations, vaccinations, treatment as needed." One by one, others rose. Mrs. Hollister from the Mercantile offering discounted supplies, Reverend Collins pledging support from his congregation, even gruff blacksmith Turner volunteering to teach metalworking skills. Xavier watched in amazement as his solitary dream transformed into a community vision before his eyes. By meeting's end, the council had voted unanimously to support the establishment of Thompson's Home for Children, not with money, but with something far more valuable: acceptance and involvement. As the crowd dispersed, Xavier found himself face to face with Katherine, her blue eyes bright with triumph. "Thank you," he said softly. "I never expected such support. Whispering Pines is a young town, Mr. Thompson. Many here know what it means to build something from nothing." She smiled. "Besides, your cause is just. How could I not help?" "You investigated my proposal," he observed. Katherine nodded unapologetically. "I believe in due diligence, Mr. Thompson, especially when children's welfare is concerned. And I passed your scrutiny with flying colors." Her expression grew serious. "When do you begin construction?" "As soon as possible." The children can't wait for perfect circumstances. No, they cannot. She hesitated. I'd like to see the property, to better understand the educational needs and possibilities. Xavier felt a leap of hope. Katherine's involvement would be invaluable, her expertise, her connections, and, he admitted privately, her company. I'm riding out tomorrow to begin clearing land for the main dormitory, he said. You're welcome to join me, if proper chaperoning can be arranged. I'll speak with Mrs. Turner. Her daughter Sarah could accompany us. Katherine extended her hand. Until tomorrow, then, Mr. Thompson. As their hands met, Xavier felt something pass between them, a shared purpose that hinted at deeper possibilities. Until tomorrow, Miss Abernathy. Neither noticed Councilman Porter watching their exchange with narrowed eyes, or the whispered conversation he initiated with several disgruntled-looking men in the corner. Some dreams, especially those challenging the status quo, inevitably face resistance, a storm gathering silently while the dreamers looked toward the sun. The Miller property exceeded Katherine's expectations. Riding alongside Xavier the next morning, with young Sarah Turner following at a discreet distance on her pony, Katherine marveled at the natural beauty of the landscape. Rolling meadows gave way to scattered stands of pine and aspen, with Miller Creek cutting a silver path through the heart of the property. The distant mountains provided a majestic backdrop, their snow-capped peaks gleaming in the morning sun. It's breathtaking, she acknowledged as Xavier helped her dismount near the old farmhouse, a weathered two-story structure that had clearly seen better days but remained solidly built. Wait until you see the view from the ridge, Xavier replied, his face animated with enthusiasm Katherine found endearing. The tour revealed both the property's potential and the enormity of Xavier's undertaking. The farmhouse needed substantial repairs but could temporarily house 6 to 8 children. The barn was structurally sound but required new roofing. Fields lay fallow after years of neglect, and the irrigation system from the creek had collapsed in several places. You have months of work before you can accept a single child, Katherine observed as they walked the perimeter of what Xavier envisioned as the future dormitory site. I know. His expression remained determined. But I've sent word to contacts in Denver and St. Louis. There are children waiting, Katherine. Children sleeping in doorways, or worse. It was the first time he'd used her given name, the informality slipping out naturally in his passion. Katherine found she didn't mind. You'll need help, she said simply. Are you volunteering? His hazel eyes met hers, hopeful yet hesitant. I believe I already have. She smiled. But I meant more substantial assistance. Physical labor, materials. I've hired 2 men from town to help with construction, starting next week. Katherine nodded thoughtfully, an idea forming. The town holds a barn raising when new families arrive. Perhaps we could organize something similar for your dormitory. A dormitory raising? Xavier looked skeptical. It's considerably more complex than a barn. The principle remains the same. Many hands make light work. Katherine surveyed the site again. If you could prepare the foundation and framing plans, I believe we could rally enough volunteers for the main construction. Xavier studied her face, seeming to search for something. Why are you helping me, Katherine? You barely know me. The directness of his question caught her off guard. Why indeed? Professional interest in the educational aspects only explained part of her enthusiasm. The truth, that something about Xavier Thompson's quiet strength and visionary heart, called to her own, seemed too forward to express. I believe in your purpose, she said instead. These children deserve champions. As do you, he replied softly. Your support means more than I can express. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities, until Sarah's voice broke the spell. Miss Abernathy, look what I found. The girl came running, clutching wildflowers. As Katherine exclaimed appropriately over Sarah's discovery, she caught Xavier watching her with an expression that sent warmth spreading through her chest. Whatever was developing between them went beyond professional collaboration, a realization both thrilling and terrifying. The following weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Xavier moved into the farmhouse, rising before dawn each day to work on repairs and preparations. Katherine divided her time between teaching duties and helping Xavier draft proposals, order supplies, and coordinate volunteers. Their collaboration quickly developed into friendship, punctuated by moments of connection that hinted at deeper emotions neither was ready to acknowledge. 3 weeks after the council meeting, Katherine organized a Saturday gathering at the property. To Xavier's amazement, over 40 townspeople arrived with tools, food, and determination. By sundown, the farmhouse boasted a new roof, repaired windows, fresh paint, and functional plumbing. The barn stood weathertight again, and the foundation for the dormitory had been staked and partially excavated. "I never expected this," Xavier confessed to Katherine as they watched the last wagons depart at dusk. "Such generosity from strangers." "They're not strangers anymore," she pointed out. "You've become part of Whispering Pines." The realization settled warmly in Xavier's chest. For a man who'd drifted most of his life, belonging somewhere felt strangely right. Not everyone supported the orphanage, however. Councilman Porter continued raising objections at town meetings, questioning everything from water rights to the moral influence of orphaned children on the community's youth. His banking connections created obstacles to Xavier's attempts to establish credit with certain suppliers. More troublingly, rumors began circulating. Whispers that Xavier wasn't what he claimed, that his interest in children was suspicious, that Katherine's involvement compromised her reputation. "Ignore them," Dr. Abernathy advised when Xavier mentioned the rumors during dinner at the Abernathy home. Small-minded people fear change, but they could damage Katherine's standing in the community, Xavier worried. Katherine set down her fork firmly. "My reputation can withstand gossip, Xavier. The children's futures matter more." Her father nodded approvingly. Katherine has always chosen principle over popularity. One reason she's remained unmarried despite numerous suitors. "Father," Katherine protested, cheeks coloring. Xavier hid a smile, secretly pleased by this revelation. He'd wondered about Katherine's heart, especially as his own feelings for her deepened with each passing day. The opportunity to demonstrate those feelings came unexpectedly the following week. Katherine had ridden out to the ranch after school to deliver textbooks for the small library Xavier was establishing. As she helped arrange the books on newly constructed shelves, dark clouds gathered suddenly over the mountains. "You should start back," Xavier warned, glancing at the approaching storm. "That looks severe." Before Katherine could respond, a deafening thunderclap shook the farmhouse, followed immediately by sheets of driving rain. Lightning split the sky in jagged bursts as wind howled around the eaves. "You can't ride in this," Xavier decided. "It's too dangerous." Katherine moved to the window, concern etching her features. "Father will worry. We'll send word once it passes." Xavier stoked the fire against the sudden chill. The storm should blow over quickly. But the tempest showed no signs of abating as afternoon faded toward evening. Wind-driven rain lashed against the windows, and the creek rose steadily, rushing brown and angry beyond the barn. "I should check on the horses," Xavier said, reaching for his slicker. Katherine caught his arm. "Be careful." The lightning. Their eyes met, mutual concern flowing between them. Xavier covered her hand with his own. "I'll be quick." Battling through the downpour to the barn, Xavier found the horses agitated but safe. As he was securing loose items that threatened to blow away, a terrifying crash sent him racing back toward the farmhouse. A massive pine had fallen across the yard, narrowly missing the house, but completely blocking the road. Katherine stood in the doorway, wide-eyed with shock. "Are you all right?" Xavier called, rushing to her side. "Yes, but..." She gestured toward the fallen tree. "We're completely cut off now." Reality settled between them as Xavier ushered her back inside. They were isolated together, with no way to send word to town before morning at the earliest. "Your reputation," Xavier said quietly as they stood dripping in the kitchen. Katherine met his gaze steadily. Sometimes propriety must yield to circumstance. The implications of their situation hung in the air between them. The impropriety of an unmarried woman spending the night alone with a bachelor, regardless of the reasons. Even in progressive Whispering Pines, such a scenario would spark gossip. "You can take the bedroom upstairs," Xavier offered. "I'll sleep down here by the fire." Katherine nodded, gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you." As night descended, the storm's fury gradually diminished to steady rainfall. Xavier provided Katherine with a clean shirt to sleep in and heated water for her to wash. They shared a simple meal of beans and biscuits, talking quietly by lamplight about books, dreams, and the children who would soon fill the ranch with life. In the soft glow of the lamp, with rain pattering against the windows, The enforced intimacy of their situation created a space for truths too tender for ordinary moments. I never thought I would find someone who understood, Xavier admitted as he poured her tea. My dream seemed so personal, so unlikely to others. It's not unlikely to me, Katherine replied. It's necessary and noble. She hesitated. I admire you greatly for it, Xavier. Something in her tone drew his eyes to hers. What he saw there, admiration mixed with something warmer, more personal, gave him courage. Katherine, I must speak plainly. These past weeks working with you have been the happiest of my life. Not just because of your help with the ranch, but because of you. Your mind, your heart, your spirit. Color rose in her cheeks, but she didn't look away. I felt it too. Xavier set down his cup, heart pounding. I know it's premature. I have nothing yet to offer except unfinished dreams and hard work ahead. But I would be honored if you would permit me to court you properly, once circumstances allow. Katherine's smile blossomed slowly, lighting her eyes. I believe circumstances have already swept us into something beyond conventional courtship, Xavier, and I find I don't mind at all. With profound gentleness, Xavier took her hand. May I hope, then, that someday, when the ranch is established and the first children have found their home here, you might consider making your home here too? Not just as the teacher, but as your wife? She finished softly when he faltered. Yes. The word emerged as barely more than a whisper. Katherine squeezed his hand. I would be honored to consider it, Xavier. But let's build your dream first. The children must come first. Our dream now, he corrected, raising her fingers to his lips in a gesture of reverence. When morning came, bringing clear skies and birdsong, Xavier found several men from town already clearing the fallen tree, led by Dr. Abernathy himself. Katherine, her father asked simply when he saw Xavier. Safe, sir. She took the bedroom upstairs. I stayed by the fire. The doctor nodded, searching Xavier's face. I trust you behaved honorably. Completely, sir. Though I should tell you. Xavier straightened his shoulders. I've asked Katherine's permission to court her, once circumstances permit. Instead of the surprise Xavier expected, Dr. Abernathy merely smiled. About time. Katherine's mother and I were beginning to wonder if you'd ever speak up. Before Xavier could process this revelation, Katherine appeared on the porch, looking remarkably composed despite her rumpled dress and hair loosened from its pins. As Dr. Abernathy embraced his daughter, Xavier caught her eye over the doctor's shoulder. The silent promise that passed between them felt as binding as any formal engagement, a commitment to the dream they now shared, and to the future they would build together, one child and one day at a time. News arrived 2 weeks later in the form of a telegram from Denver. Xavier's contacts had identified 5 children in urgent need of placement, 3 brothers orphaned by a mining accident and 2 sisters whose mother had succumbed to tuberculosis. They could arrive by train within the month if accommodations were ready. 5 children, Xavier breathed, the telegram trembling in his hands as he stood in Katherine's classroom after the students had departed. It's happening, Katherine. Her eyes shone with shared excitement. The farmhouse is ready. The garden is planted. You've hired Mrs. Simmons as cook and housemother. What more do we need? Beds, clothing, more books. Xavier ran a hand through his hair, suddenly overwhelmed by practicalities. And the dormitory construction has barely begun. Katherine took the telegram, reading the details. Ages 6 to 12. 2 girls, 3 boys. She looked up, determination in her eyes. We'll manage. The farmhouse will suffice until the dormitory is complete. We need to accelerate construction, Xavier decided. I'll hire more workers. Or, Katherine suggested, we could hold that dormitory raising I proposed. The foundation is complete, the lumber delivered. With enough hands. The idea took root immediately. Within days, plans were drafted, volunteers enlisted, and supplies organized. Mayor Wilkins proclaimed it a town event, closing businesses for a Saturday to enable maximum participation. Porter and his allies attempted to undermine the effort, suggesting the project was fiscally irresponsible and socially disruptive. But their voices were increasingly drowned out by the growing enthusiasm of the majority. The dormitory raising exceeded all expectations. Over 60 men arrived at dawn, followed by women bearing food and children eager to help with smaller tasks. Under the direction of Master Carpenter Jenkins, the frame rose steadily throughout the morning. By midday, the skeleton of a substantial building stood where only foundation had been before. Xavier moved constantly among the workers, his face shining with sweat and joy as he passed boards, drove nails, and expressed gratitude to every volunteer. Katherine organized the women's efforts, ensuring meals appeared at regular intervals and that younger helpers found appropriate tasks. Dr. Abernathy, watching them work in tandem, remarked to Reverend Collins, "They complement each other perfectly, like they've been partners for years rather than months." "God's hand at work," the Reverend replied with satisfaction, "bringing together two souls with the same purpose." By sunset, the dormitory stood remarkably complete, exterior walls finished, roof shingled, windows installed. Interior work remained, but the structure was weathertight and sound, ready for completion in the coming weeks. As lanterns were lit for the celebration dinner, Xavier found a moment alone with Katherine near the creek, away from the cheerful crowd. "We did it," he said wonderingly. "Because of you. Because you believed." Katherine shook her head. "Because they believed. In you, Xavier. In your vision." "Our vision," he corrected gently. In the golden light of sunset, with the sound of celebration behind them and the creek murmuring beside them, Xavier took Katherine's hands in his. "I know we agreed to wait," he said softly, "to focus on the children first. But today has shown me something important, that dreams grow stronger when shared." Katherine's eyes widened as Xavier dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Katherine Abernathy, I love you. Your mind, your heart, your unwavering spirit. Will you build this dream with me, not just as a partner in purpose, but as my wife? Will you marry me and make this not just a home for orphaned children, but our family?" Tears sparkled in Katherine's eyes, catching the last rays of sunlight. "Yes," she whispered. "With all my heart, yes." Xavier rose, drawing her into his arms. Their first kiss, gentle and reverent, sealed promises beyond words, of shared purpose, unwavering commitment, and love that would shelter not only each other, but every child who would come into their care. When they returned to the celebration, hands linked and faces radiant, no announcement was necessary. The community that had helped build their dream recognized the joy between them and erupted in cheers and congratulations. Even Councilman Porter, witnessing the overwhelming support, finally conceded with grudging respect. "Thompson's got determination, I'll give him that. And with Katherine by his side, they might actually succeed." The train whistle pierced the autumn air as Xavier and Katherine stood waiting on the platform, hands clasped tightly between them. 6 weeks had passed since the dormitory raising. 6 weeks of feverish preparation, finishing interiors, acquiring supplies, hiring staff, and planning routines. "Nervous?" Katherine asked softly, glancing at Xavier's tense profile. He nodded, not trusting his voice. Everything they'd worked for came down to this moment, to 5 children they'd never met, but had already changed their lives immeasurably. The train hissed to a stop, belching steam across the platform. Passengers began disembarking, but Xavier's attention focused on a severe-looking woman in a dark traveling suit, guiding 5 children in neatly mended but obviously second-hand clothing. "Mr. Thompson," she called, scanning the platform. Xavier stepped forward, Katherine beside him. "Welcome to Whispering Pines, Mrs. Hargrove. Thank you for escorting the children." The social worker nodded crisply, then turned to the children. "These are the Connors brothers, William, James, and Thomas. And the Miller sisters, Elizabeth and Margaret." 5 solemn faces looked up at Xavier and Katherine. The oldest boy, William, stood protectively near his younger brothers, while the older Miller girl held her sister's hand tightly. Their expressions revealed the wariness of children who had learned that change rarely meant improvement. Katherine knelt to their level, her voice gentle. "We're so happy you've arrived safely. We have a home prepared for you, with your own beds and plenty of good food." "Do we have to work in a factory?" asked James, the middle Connor boy. "No," Xavier replied, kneeling beside Katherine. "This is a ranch. You'll learn useful skills, riding horses, growing food, building things. And you'll attend school with Miss Abernathy here." "All of us?" asked Elizabeth Miller, her voice barely audible. "Even Maggie?" "Especially Maggie," Katherine assured her. "Every child deserves education." Little Thomas Connor, no more than 6, regarded Xavier solemnly. "Mr. Jenkins at the orphanage said you're building this place 'cause you were an orphan too. Is that true?" Xavier nodded, something tightening in his chest. It is. I know how it feels to lose your family. That's why Katherine and I want to create a new kind of family here, one where you'll be safe and cared for. Are you married? William asked bluntly. Katherine laughed softly. Not yet, but we will be next month. Then you'll be like our new ma and pa? Thomas asked, hope flickering in his eyes. Xavier exchanged a glance with Katherine, reading the same emotion in her eyes that swelled in his heart. We can never replace your parents, he said carefully. But we promise to care for you as if you were our own. Every one of you. Something in his sincerity must have reached them, for Thomas suddenly stepped forward and slipped his small hand into Xavier's larger one. Can we go home now? I'm awful tired of traveling. Home. The word echoed in Xavier's mind as he led the children toward the waiting wagon, where Dr. Abernathy and Mrs. Simmons waited to help. Home, not just for these 5 children, but for all who would follow, and for Xavier himself, who had wandered so long seeking purpose. The children's eyes widened as they approached the ranch, taking in the freshly painted farmhouse with smoke curling from its chimney, the new dormitory with its gleaming windows, the barn where a few milk cows and horses grazed in the adjacent paddock. All this is for orphans? William asked incredulously. All this is for you, Xavier confirmed, and for others who will come later. That evening, after baths and a hearty meal, after Mrs. Simmons had tucked the younger children into beds with clean sheets and handmade quilts, Xavier and Katherine stood on the farmhouse porch, watching stars emerge above the mountains. We've only just begun, Katherine murmured, leaning against Xavier's shoulder. There's so much more to do. But we've made a start, Xavier replied, his arms secure around her waist. A real start. In the quiet darkness, with the children sleeping safely under their care and the future stretching before them like an unwritten story, Xavier and Katherine sealed their commitment with a kiss that tasted of promise fulfilled and dreams yet to unfold. 1 year later, sunlight streamed through the windows of the small chapel as Katherine walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Her ivory dress, simply cut but elegant, complemented the wildflowers in her bouquet, flowers gathered that morning by the children now standing proudly alongside the altar. Xavier waited for her, tall and handsome in a new black suit, his face alight with a joy that took Katherine's breath away. Beside him stood William Connor, beaming with importance as he held the ring. The past year had transformed them all. The original 5 children had been joined by 7 more, filling the dormitory with laughter, squabbles, learning, and growth. The ranch produced enough food to feed them all, with Xavier teaching the older boys ranching skills while Katherine divided her time between the town school and the educational needs of her home children. Challenges remained. Funding was always tight, and some children arrived with wounds deeper than physical neglect. But the community that had raised the dormitory continued supporting their efforts, with regular volunteers, donations, and genuine care for the children's welfare. As Katherine reached Xavier's side and placed her hand in his, she felt the rightness of their journey. What had begun as his solitary dream had become their shared mission, embraced by a town and embodied in the children who now watched with shining eyes as Reverend Collins began the ceremony. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Xavier's hand tightened around hers as they spoke their vows, promises already demonstrated through months of shared labor, challenges, and triumphs. I, Xavier, take you, Katherine, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I, Katherine, take you, Xavier, to be my lawfully wedded husband. When they were pronounced husband and wife, and Xavier's lips met hers in their first kiss as a married couple, the chapel erupted in cheers, the loudest coming from the children who had found in them not just guardians, but family. The celebration that followed at the ranch reflected the community that had made it possible, tables laden with food contributed by townspeople, music from local musicians, and at the center, Xavier and Katherine dancing while surrounded by their growing family of children. As evening approached, Dr. Abernathy raised a glass in toast. To Xavier and Katherine Thompson, who dreamed of building a home for children who had none, and in doing so, created a family larger than they ever imagined. Later, as stars appeared above the ranch that had once been just a vision in a young cowboy's heart, Xavier led his bride toward the small cabin built especially for them at the edge of the property, close enough to respond to any need, yet providing the privacy newlyweds deserved. Happy, Mrs. Thompson? Xavier asked, lifting Katherine over the threshold. Completely, Mr. Thompson. She touched his face tenderly. You built your dream ranch for orphaned children, and the town helped make it reality. But you gave me something even more precious. What's that? A purpose greater than myself, a partner I adore, and a family that will keep growing with every child who needs us. Xavier gathered her close, overwhelmed by gratitude for the journey that had led them here, from a chance meeting in a saloon to a life dedicated to healing young hearts and building futures. I love you, Katherine Thompson, he whispered against her hair. Today, tomorrow, and for all the days we're granted to watch our family grow. Outside their window, the lights of the dormitory glowed warm against the Montana night, sheltering children who no longer faced the world alone. Inside, two hearts beat as one, united in love and purpose, their greatest adventure just beginning.